Well, hello everybody. We are back. I'm Dan Schinder,
And I'm Steven Schinder.
and back for his second interview, Steve Hackett. Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us again and
Hi there.
daring
Hi,
to put
Dan
up
and
with
Steve.
us.
How you guys doing?
Really well, thanks.
Doing
Nice to
great.
talk.
Yeah, excited to talk about this. Really, what I think is an adventurous new album that you're putting out. Not adventurous in the sense that it's beyond your means or anything, but it's so refreshing in 2023 or whatever, 24, whatever year it is, to get music like this still. It's so we have
Uh-huh.
questions. It's just fantastic.
Sure. Sure.
Great.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's start with next year. We'll start with next year. We'll look into the future first.
Yes.
2025, can you believe is going to be your 50th anniversary of a solo career? What first of
Oh,
all,
yeah.
like how does that even feel?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? The passing of time, the clock is ticking. And every day I wake up and I'm still here, I think. It's a good start.
Absolutely a good start. And we read that there's elements of the Circus of the Nightwhale that you've wanted to say for a while. And how long has that been lingering around? And is there, in fact, an autobiographical element to it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's an autobiographical story, although some of it is told in the third person with an imaginary character called Traveller, with LA on the end instead of ER. It's something that I was born in 1950. We start off with snippets, sound bites from radio, from the BBC, the way things sounded at that time. And of course, it's all distorted and mono and radio tuning in and out to create or recreate that time, so that even if you're not interested in a note that I might have played, you get a reflection of what the world was like at that time. So the first track is People of the Smoke, which refers to London. A nickname for London was called the Smoke because it was very, very smoky and very, very polluted ever since the 1800s, never mind our century. So that's how it kicks off. You get there's something from Listen with Mother. The show was Listen with Mother, and they would say, "Are you sitting comfortably?" Then there'd be a long pause, and then I'll begin. And this was children's entertainment back in the day. Very slow, very patronizing, and of course, the moment you hear those words, then there's a baby's cry because the baby isn't comfortable. Then the baby's cry becomes something resembling a train whistle.
Yeah.
Then there's a steam train that comes in, because they were all steam trains when I grew up at that time. I mean, I didn't grow up in the era of gas. Electricity had been invented, but not as far as trains were concerned.
Right.
Well, certainly not the local trains. So all of that steam and London in post-war recovery, where rationing was still in force.
Right.
For those who don't know, that means that you had a card and you could only buy a certain amount of food. People could have a certain amount of milk for their babies, meat for the family, etc. So there was still very much the wartime mentality in force. So I wanted all of that to be reflected in the opening moments of the record. And then there's the famous bell, Big Ben, this huge bell in the House of Parliament that goes off St. Stephen's Tower.
Yeah.
At the same time as a string orchestra kicks in, driving it in a sort of Vivaldi-like sort of manner, and then a rock band kicks in. So the train drives the orchestra, then the orchestra drives the rock band. And that's just in the first minute or so, all that stuff happens. Then we're off on the journey, the life journey that, as I say, started at that time and is still going on for me.
Yeah, a lot of theater of the mind going on there, which being that you've never had anything to do with any epics, I'm very impressed.
Well, that's right, you know, and it's interesting. It's a kind of story of redemption, and it wouldn't be for the first time that we'd had that, you know, with my Genesis background. But
Right.
of course, this is much better.
Yeah,
Because
well,
it's me.
even your first Genesis Revisited album with
Yeah,
the late great John Wetton on it had elements of
yeah.
that as well, which was great.
Mm. Oh, wonderful to work with John Wetton, late great John Wetton, late great Ian MacDonald on
Yeah,
that record too. Both great pals. And then, of course, in recent years, I'd worked with Chris Squire, the late great Chris Squire,
yeah,
and various other people. Jim Diamond, friend of mine, but they've all passed. But somehow they're out there in spirit, beavering away, I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely. And their music lives on, which is awesome. And your music with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also enjoyed your piece that you contributed to the John Wetton book, An Extraordinary Life, which came out last year. So it's very great to hear like about, you know, it's always great to hear memories of him and the people
Yes.
that he knew.
Well, yeah, and John was a pal, a brother in song, I like to think of him as. And of course, both John and Ian were in the band that we had when we were in Japan doing the Tokyo tapes. So there is that for people who want to see what that was like. There's also, I managed to get Chris Squire and John Wetton on stage when we were doing Cruise to the Edge one year, and we were doing All Along the Watchtower. So that's a blast too.
Awesome.
I think that's up there on YouTube. For some reason, there's somebody shot it from the front and somebody shot it from behind the stage, where you can hardly hear any of the music. But the one from the front, that's the one worth watching. And you get there are various other people up on stage as well. Nick Beggs and Simon Collins.
Yeah.
Phil's son.
Yeah.
Who's a wonderful drummer himself, of course.
Yeah.
I've got talking drums here.
Molecule. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, being that you had Chris and John together, both with great sense of humor, do you have a funny story to share with the two of them together?
Oh my God. There's probably too many, I should think. Those guys, yeah. I mean, Chris was larger than life in every sense of the word. That was always funny. Yeah, I would have to, when I was working with Chris, I'd have Roger King, keyboard player and engineering stuff for Hackett, you know.
Yeah.
And he would show up at about 11, and then we'd wait for Chris. And at 4 PM, we'd get a call from Chris to say, I'm up now. Could you come and pick me up? And then so I'd drive to him, which would be at least about 3/4 of an hour away, pick him up, bring him in, just as Roger was ready to go home. You know, so you get an idea of conflicting lifestyles. You know,
right.
You got the night bird that was Chris versus, you know, the work ethic of Roger King, and they were like chalk and cheese. I never got to work with John Wetton and Chris on the same project. That didn't happen. But I remember meeting John Wetton many years ago when King Crimson had just done Lark's Tongues in Aspic.
Yeah.
And we went to see them in Guildford. It was Phil Collins, myself, Pete Banks, Tony Kay. We were all in the back of this van, or sitting there where you'd normally have equipment. And we all trooped off down there to see them, enjoyed that, very theatrical. Then came back to London, went to a club called the Speakeasy, and who should walk in but John Wetton? And I said, just seen you live, you were great. We said, oh, was it all right? And all this, he wasn't sure, you know, and I could see he was very modest and very accomplished, just my kind of guy. So we became friends and started showing up on each other's records from time to time. Sometimes I would just play harmonica for him. Sometimes I would make a trip just to show up and blow a few notes on blues harp with him. But I loved working with them. I loved working with Chris. Um, they were both great, not just as bass players, but as band leaders and writers,
Yeah.
and they were both full of great stories all the time. They were very funny guys. We we
Yeah.
swapped old war stories in a metaphorical sense
Yeah.
of the word, you know.
Yeah. Since we brought them up, I'd like to relay a question from one of the
Sure.
viewers, Gary Van Leeuwen. I hope I'm pronouncing
Yep.
your name right, Gary. He says, has Steve ever done any of the Squack It live with Chris? Had you? I don't recall.
I don't think we did. No, I think Squacket was something that at one time we were offered to headline at a thing called the High Voltage Festival in London.
Oh, wow.
But Chris had already signed up to do some Yes gigs, and so that didn't happen. And that was if it was going to happen, it was going to be at that time. But
Right.
it doesn't mean that I wouldn't touch that material in future. I think A Life Within a Day was
that
pretty
would be
good,
great.
and the other one was a perfect love song at the end of the album. I liked very much, and there's another one. Divided Self is an interesting tune, kind of Beatlesque in its way once it hits the chorus.
Yeah.
I have great memories of working with Chris. Chris and I started working together at a time when I needed a boost, and he certainly was that in droves.
That's great.
Yeah. And you mentioned Cruise to the Edge, and I know you're slated to perform there next month. Is anything from the Circus and the Nightwhale gonna be performed there? It'd be kind of fitting given the setting, you know?
Yes. Well, I'm hoping that we're gonna start rehearsing pretty soon in the States, as it happens, and we're gonna look at a few tunes from that. So we'll see what can be done as regards that. Yes. I'm looking forward to doing some of this new material. It has its challenges because it's very ambitious music and there's a lot going on it. So to be able to deliver it all live has its challenges, believe me. So I'm in the middle of personal rehearsals to try and get that stuff in my memory and under my fingers. The stuff that you do spontaneously at one point, then suddenly you're going to play it live, but it's a whole different story. Play it and sing it live.
Yeah, I love the flow of the album. It really keeps up the tension, and then you kind of take a detour into this beautiful track called Ghost Moon and Living Love. Like you get like different moods in some of these, and then you go back into the fray. Like I just love the way that this whole thing was structured.
Oh, I'm glad you liked that. That was the track that I felt most vulnerable on, to be honest. But that's a love song where I'm using my ballad voice on it, and I worked long and hard on the vocals. I was influenced. There's a band called Dare over here, and a singer called Darren Wharton, and he's very, very good. I gave him a name check at one point, and he got back to me, and I think they're very, very good. I was trying to write something in the style of, because he's got this marvelous voice. So I was trying to be him. Every singer that tries to be some other singer, you always end up sounding like yourself at the end of the day. But I wanted to get the vibrato right. I wanted to be able to sing high and sweet. So most of the vocals, I tried to keep them high and sweet most of the time, and I share harmonies with Amanda Lehman, who starts it off with her celestial voice right at the beginning. That gives us a kind of, I don't know, somewhere between. I always think when I work with her, we sound like a cross between. Dare I say something a little bit like some of George Harrison stuff. It comes out a little bit like that.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I like working in a vocal team.
Yeah, regarding vocals, I had a question, Steve. The song "Get Me Out" has a really nice, expansive, sort of blossoming vocal parts, and there's a lot of subtleties, and then the whole song grows. Are those vocals you and Nad, or Nad layered, or who are those vocals on that song?
On
On Get Me
Let me
Out?
see, Get Me Out. No, the vocals are me
Okay.
on that, and Amanda.
Okay, it's great.
Nad does sing one of the tracks called "Taking You Down."
Okay.
So that is him on that. It's me and Amanda first on the first track, and then there's an instrumental. Then a third track is Nad.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's kind of back to me and Amanda for the rest of the vocals.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. I was real curious, and I wanted to ask a question, particularly about the song "Circo Inferno."
Yes,
I think the intro of that is the most different from anything else on the album, as far as the way songs start. And you've got the like kind of Baroque Renaissance-y kind of stringed instruments. I wanted to ask what those instruments were, and it also just the way it progresses from there and what happens right before the guitar solo. That I think might be my favorite song on the album.
Oh well, thank you for that. That's interesting. It's there's Malik Mansurov from Azerbaijan playing the tar. It's a short scale string instrument.
Yeah.
He plays stuff that is kind of Arabic jazz. It's stuff that's common to 4 territories: Azerbaijan, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, all those places. Which means, because of playing in those places, that he can't get a visa. They wouldn't let him into the United States. Which is unfortunate. Because, but he's only a terrorist as regards a player. It's like working with someone who's a cross between, Ravi Shankar and John McLaughlin. If someone's got chops like that, so it's a wonderful sound. He's being accompanied by Roger King, using some kind of acoustic modeling to set it up, but it sounds like they're both in the same room at the same time. The truth is that those performances were at some distance in time and geography. But I'd recorded Malik in Budapest, in Hungary, which is where I met him. He was working with the band called Jabe, the Hungarian fusion band, and Hungary has been at the center of the kind of crossroads of Europe, really. I've worked with African musicians with them, American jazz musicians. I've worked with Cymbalim with them, guys who build their own instruments, doing it live. And all those performances are very different to each other. So it's a kind of musical adventure. I have to play dangerously and take chances with them in the hope that I'll get it right and not make a fool of myself. But that's, you jump in with both feet with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I love how as the song electrifies, it becomes electric. It sounds like it still stays in that Arabic sort of music mode.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
It's kind of it's kind of Middle Eastern in a way. A Phrygian or Phrygian is the mode on it. So that's it. There ought to be a country called Phrygia where that comes from.
Yeah,
awesome.
And you and your band have been, these last few years been celebrating Genesis albums crossing the half-century mark. I saw Foxtrot at 50 in Los Angeles back in November. It was a phenomenal concert. You and everyone there were incredible. And looking at the tour dates, you'll be bringing that back to North America and in the spring, and then gearing up for another tour starting in Europe this summer, where you'll be playing Genesis Grades, Slam Highlights, and some of their solo material. How do you go about choosing what's absolutely essential for this set list? It must be really tough.
It's
right?
such a huge body of music. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, there's a lot of choices that have to be made. It's not always easy, believe me. When I play one thing, it breaks my heart that I'm not playing another thing. There were a lot of great things. Just in the Genesis canon alone, there are a lot of great things that I think to myself, I'll get around to that then, and there just isn't time. it's terribly difficult to serve all needs equally. The need to move on, the need to keep the museum doors open for the glorious old exhibits, the stuff that John Lennon said he liked when he called us true sons of the Beatles. That's enough for me to keep that stuff alive. That classic period, 72 to 73, when we gained his ear. So that was very interesting. All of that
is. I don't know if you know this. Here's someone else whose ears you gain. I just started to read this morning and then got busy. I have to finish the article tonight. But Deborah Bonham, John Bonham's younger sister, explains that he didn't feel there was a place for girls now, this is way back, remember, that there was a place for girls in rock and blues music. He wanted her to be a vet or a lawyer. And then she got into your era of Genesis with Peter Gabriel, and that's what sold her on wanting to take that path. And she started in opera, and now, of course, she's got a great band just belting it out. And I thought that was a really interesting nugget, how influenced she was by your exact piece of prog contributions that inspired her to be a female vocalist.
Right. Yes. I haven't met her, but I met Jason, and I met him when he was working with Black Country Communion with Joe Bonamassa, and that was very interesting, having a conversation with him, and he was talking about Phil and the influence that had been on him, and talking about Dance on a Volcano, and I was surprised. I thought he might not really be aware of that, with the legacy of Zeppelin himself. But I must check out Deborah's work from what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's worth it. Absolutely. And another great drummer, your very own Craig Blundell. We're looking forward to having on again. We reached out to him again. Really great job on the album. Just, wow. He's so good.
He's one of the drummers on the album. Yeah. He does most of the drum work. And we recorded a lot of this stuff live at sound checks.
Oh, wow.
So,
really?
Yes.
That explains the huge
to
sound.
use the hall and the ambience, which was a novel idea for me, because we were pushed for time doing the album. And so we didn't want to, we didn't want to be waiting around for, drum deliveries.
Right.
We had a computer sketch. So we had quite a lot of stuff done, and he was playing to things that sounded fairly finished. Putting on drums afterwards doesn't always sound like the best way to do things, but needs must. There are also another couple of really great drummers on the album. It was Nick DiVigilio, who kicks off the opening track, People of the Smoke, and there's also Hugo Dagenhart, who's on one of the tracks, Breakout. And so that's they're all great drummers. They're none of them. There's not a slouch there, really. They're all fantastic. I love them all. Yeah. They're wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. How exciting. What do you like to do when you're not doing anything to do with music? You're not writing, not producing, not touring, not recording. What do you like to do?
Well, in recent times, I haven't had as much time off as I know that I need, physically and mentally and everything. What I like to do when I get on a plane, which I do pretty regularly, is to have a book, whatever that might be. And so that helps me to have a rest from my life and shut up and have a conversation with someone else where I just listen.
Yeah.
I read, I listen to what they're saying. I find that therapeutic.
Do you have a
normally when I get
genre
in from a
that you
gig.
like?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, Steve. Do you have a specific genre that you like to read?
Yeah, I think I like to buy trash most of the time. Really. Anything that's removed from reality.
Yeah.
Most of the time, adventure stuff, spy stuff, and what have you. The stuff that they make into movies.
Yeah.
And I get caught up with the ride. Otherwise, when I'm at home, I like to read biographies a lot. Autobiographies.
Yeah.
And I'm reading Patrick Stewart, of course.
Oh, making it
Star
so?
Trek. Yeah, making it so. That's right.
Yeah,
That's an interesting one.
yeah, I recently listened to the audiobook of that. It's a great one,
Right.
yeah.
Really? Oh, if he's done an audio book doing it himself, I'm sure that must be really good to have an actor with a voice like that
Yeah.
Yeah.
telling you what it was like. Yeah, for sure. So that one I also started. Who's the other guy now? It'll come to me, but yeah, a fair amount of musicians stuff
That's
in
great.
there, of course.
Yeah, Patrick just came up as a suggestion in my Audible, so maybe I'll go ahead and get that. I just
Yeah.
finished this guy's audiobook, Geddy Lee's book. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
really? Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
read
My
that yet.
Effing Life.
So good. And just one sort of spoiler for people. One of my favorite parts about it is the common thread through the whole thing is really it's an amazing love story with his wife. It's
Ah,
great. And all the trying times with his life in Rush and the babies
hmm.
being born. It's really just that alone, that element alone makes it a really great book, but all the other stuff's wonderful too. And he reads it in his voice. It's just great. It really is. Highly
Yeah.
recommend.
And we also recently listened to Phil's book, Not Dead Yet. So we're really
Right.
into these musician
Yeah.
memoirs and
Yeah.
autobiographies and such.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have one
Um,
coming? When do we get yours?
I have one already, which is called A Genesis in My Bed, which
Okay.
has been out, I think, since lockdown, really.
Okay. Well, great.
Um,
Yeah.
and the album, the current album, is a kind of companion piece to that, but you get it
Ah.
musically,
Oh,
as
wow. We
opposed
have
to
to get
just
it
merely.
then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can people find it? The usual places, Steve? Amazon and
Oh
whatnot?
my God! Yeah, I think you can get it on
Okay.
Amazon, and a lot of the time we sell it at gigs as well. So there's that. They go pretty fast, I have to say. And unlike CDs, they weigh quite a lot. So
Yeah.
Well, we'll look that up, find the link, and we'll put it in the
yeah,
description of where we put this. Even though we're live now, we're also
sure.
going to put it on our other channels. But we don't want to keep you too long. We
That's
so
I
appreciate
have
your
to do
time.
another interview right now. I'm awfully
Good.
sorry because I've got them all
That's
back
okay.
to back.
No, we want to be
It's a crazy
respectful of your
life,
time.
but it's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
lovely talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you
too.
so
And I
much.
look
Thanks for
forward to
being
seeing
on.
you either in Tucson or Phoenix in April.
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you, guys.
Take care.
All the
Bye bye.
best.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.